We just realized that there's this huge gap of good quality sexual education in the home, in schools, and in just kind of broader society. Do you feel good about your body? Do you feel like you can make your own decisions about your body? Do you feel like you have a good, relationship with your partners, etc.? A lot of the things that are kind of around sexuality and sex has a lot to do with other people, because they also affect our decisions and beliefs about sex and sexuality.
Sort of ties to like consent and issues around consent with regards to that. Because I know at some point in South Africa there was this misconception that if someone who's HIV positive has sex with a child who's a virgin, then like they will no longer have HIV, and that resulted in so many young people and young girls who are virgins being raped because of that. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bomika Zilupindo. I am a clinical psychologist and a doctoral student at the University of Oxford. And today I am not here alone. We have a very special guest. And I'm just going to let her introduce herself and then tell us a little bit about who she is and some of the work that she does.
Thank you so much, Bomi. Hi everybody, my name is Neira Budiono, but people usually call me Neira. I am originally from Indonesia and I am an online sex educator. So I started this online platform providing free and evidence-based comprehensive sexuality education in my home country, which is Indonesia. I think I started about like 7 years ago, so it's been quite a while. And since then I have been working in the global health field, mostly working with young people to improve their sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I just recently also completed an MSc in international health from the University of Oxford, where I met Bomi. And here we are. So
and actually the way we met was so interesting. Actually, guys, literally I met someone at a club and they were just like, whoa, you're a psychologist. I have a friend, she loves talking about sex. Let's go. And I'm like, please.
I love that. I love that he introduced me like
literally.
She loves talking about sex.
Because the first thing he asked, he was just like, you're a psychologist. Do you actually like talking about sex? I'm like, yeah. And he was just like, I have the perfect person for you.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
I'm so grateful for it. I'm actually quite curious, what made you interested in sexual reproductive health in the first place, and even just like the thought of doing something on sexual education specifically within your context, and I guess more broadly because it's something that you've actually followed through with it.
So basically it started when I was in undergrad, so I was studying, I also studied psychology, by the way, but it was a Bachelor of Psychology, so I'm not a clinical psychologist. She's the real one. I'm just a fake one.
Listen, you're the real one. We're all the real ones.
So and then it was kind of like me and a group of friends. We were kind of talking about what are some like initiatives or programs that we can start for young people's health. We were kind of interested in doing that. And then I kind of just reflected on my experiences growing up as an adolescent in Indonesia, and the fact that I didn't receive really any good education at all about sex and sexual health and how to take care of my body, how to understand my desires, things like that. And it was all everything is so like taboo, stigmatized. Nobody wants to talk about it. But then also at the same time I was seeing a lot of like double standards in terms of what's okay for boys to do, what's okay for girls to do, things like that. And so kind of reflecting on that, and we just realized that there's this huge gap of good quality sexual education in the home, in schools, and in just kind of broader society. And we were just broke students, basically. We didn't have any kind of resources. So we just turned to what we knew best, which was social media, and kind of with the understanding that a lot of young people were also looking for this information online because they couldn't do it in other places. So we started this platform, which has grown a lot and has kind of basically sent me to Oxford, which is amazing. Really, really grateful for that.
Actually, do you mind sharing what the platform is? Because I'm sure people would actually be interested in checking it out.
The thing is in Indonesian. Sorry, but
I got it. The only thing I know in Indonesian is saying suksuma. That is as far as my Indonesian goes.
Dude, but that is so much better than
Thank you.
So many other people. Congrats.
Thank you.
Congrats on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe you can tell us a little bit about like what is even reproductive health before we dive into anything else. Like,
Sure.
what is it? Why is it important? Like, why should actually people even know about it in the first place?
Yeah. So sexual and reproductive health has kind of gone through a lot of like different iterations of and definitions and things like that. But basically now kind of like the accepted definition is just this state of good physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being in terms of anything related to sexual and reproductive organs, functioning, etc. So basically anything that's related to sexual and reproductive health, but also kind of taking it a bit more broadly, because we used to think of it as kind of like, okay, menstrual health or maybe like HIV and AIDS, but now it's kind of gone a bit broader in terms of also looking at it from a well-being sense. Like, do you feel good about your body? Do you feel like you can make your own decisions about your body? Do you feel like you have a good, you know, relationship with your partners, etc. So now it's gotten to be like a lot broader, and it was originally like very much about like your organs and like you know things like that, but now it's kind of like a lot bigger and kind of encompassing like this holistic definition.
It's actually quite interesting that you say that, because like immediately when I also think about like reproductive health, I think about ovaries, your testes, you know, what's happening in there, like what's the situation down there,
the hormones,
literally thinking about more hormonal related stuff. But you know what you describe in terms of like the holistic aspect of you as a person, and also the intersection with more mental health related stuff. And I just wondered, like, based on what you've come to learn and understand, what are some of like the key components of sexual reproductive health that people might want to know about, and like how do we even go about like gaining the sense of awareness and being quite proactive in the ways in which we go about and making sure that we do have, I guess, healthier sexual reproductive experiences?
So I think for me it's easier to think of it as like those 4 components that I was saying, like wait, is it 4 or 3? I don't know, but let's go through them. The first is just physical, which is around kind of like the function of your organ, if they're, you know, functioning as they should, if you're experiencing any pain, any kind of, you know, dysregulation with your hormones, any of those kind of physical manifestations and symptoms is definitely one thing, which is what you said, right? About like these organs and hormones, etc. But then it's also about kind of like the mental and emotional side of things. So kind of like whether you feel good about yourself, whether you know your own kind of desires, whether you know yourself, whether you understand what like, you know, sexuality means to you, how you discover these things within yourself, like self-awareness and feeling good, but you know, basically you're yourself. And the third is, I think, what a lot of people also kind of miss, which is the social aspect, because a lot of the things that are kind of around sexuality and sex has a lot to do with other people, with obviously with our partner or partners, but also with like family, health professionals, because they also affect our decisions and beliefs about sex and sexuality. So that's also a really big part of sexual and reproductive health, kind of like having, you know, fulfilling relationships, consent, also having healthy relationships, respectful relationships. So yeah, those are kind of the things that I usually will kind of tell people to try and look at it from like mental, like physical, mental, and then social. And then, sorry, what was the second question?
So in terms of like what could people proactively do in terms of just making sure that, I guess, they are sexually and reproductively healthy. Or
So,
even just healthier.
So watching this video
That's
is a good start.
Stay here, guys.
Watch till the end.
That's true.
Yes. But no, on like a serious note, I think first having that openness to kind of just learn about it is really important, because a lot of people, you know, hear about sexual health and they're kind of like, no, that's like, it's not for me, especially like younger people. you know, like adolescents and teenagers. So just having the openness to kind of learn more about your body and what it means to be sexually and reproductively healthy, and seek out sources. You can, you know, look in the internet. I think nowadays there's like more resources that you can look for. Obviously talk to health professionals that you trust as well if you have any concerns. So just having more of that like open attitude to learn, and also kind of unlearn some of the things that maybe you have heard growing up, you know, through the media or like other people telling you. There's so many myths and misconceptions. So sometimes, like through my own kind of journey, I also discovered that I'm not only learning things, but I'm having to like unlearn some things that I thought was true and was actually, okay, that's not actually true. So I think having that openness is like a really good first step to then, you know, I think after then you do your research and talk to people, you'll find more steps to kind of do that, and having good just self-awareness about what it is that you need physically, mentally, and socially, and then go from there.
No, that makes perfect sense. Since you mentioned that, like about like unlearning, because I think honestly there's just so much I've had to unlearn about like just sex itself, reproductive health, even being able to have these kinds of conversations and actually having them with so much ease and not feeling like it's something that's taboo. Those kind of things are such important things, and I just wondered like what have been some of the myths and misconceptions that you have encountered in some of the work that you've done and some of the young people that you've worked with, and what would be like more accurate facts in relation to those misconceptions?
Okay, there's so many misconceptions and myths, and I think it's a little difficult to pick, but I think one thing just kind of generally is that a lot of people have this misconception that your sexuality should be this way, or like your sex life should be that way. You should be attracted to this kind of person. You should feel attractive if you have this certain body type, or so I hear a lot of these like I should be this, I should be that, and this, a lot of it is kind of like really driven by societal norms and what people tell you and what you've been hearing since you were a kid, basically. So I think that the biggest misconception that I've heard is that people think their sexuality should be a certain way. And that's a really big misconception, because now we know, and a lot of researchers is telling us that, I mean, people are different and people function differently, including in their sexualities and their organs, how they think, how they feel. And there's no single kind of script or experience that everybody should have, basically. So I think that's like one of the biggest ones. And then there are also some just kind of like crazy and weird ones, like if you have sex without a condom, you won't get pregnant as long as like you eat this particular fruit after, or then like you like pee after having sex, things like that. So it's just kind of like there's like weird things. So I think those are some of them.
I'm actually just thinking about one, and this sort of ties to like consent and issues around consent with regards to that, because I know at some point in South Africa there was this misconception that if someone who's HIV positive has sex with a child who's a virgin, then like they will no longer have HIV, and that resulted in so many young people and young girls who are virgins being raped because of that. And there's just so much that's around, you know, those kind of societal stuff. And I guess I was also thinking about you mentioning consent again, and how like families, communities, schools have such a massive part to play in the kind of understanding and learning and education around reproductive health, sex, and everything that has to do with that. I'm even just thinking about my own experience. When I came to Oxford, it was the first time that I was actually exposed to a space where I was taught about consent. I'm just like, whoa, actually, like it's part of like the education system that when you get here, you are taught about consent and what it means and what it doesn't mean. There's this video they even made us watch about tea, right?
Yeah, the tea video.
The tea video.
We love that video.
That's the best. We'll also link that video to this video just to make sure that you guys also watch it. But I also wondered, what do you think the role of families, communities, schools, what role do they have in helping young people actually have access access to this kind of information and education, because those are the spaces where these kind of misconceptions actually get dispelled.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely true, because I think in terms of sexual and reproductive health, a lot of people think that, okay, it's the doctor's job to kind of teach us about sexual health, but it's actually, I mean, obviously doctors and health professionals play a role, but it's actually a lot of these broader structures and systems like schools, families, governments, policymakers, even tech platforms nowadays, because there's so much happening there. They have a role in kind of creating this enabling environment for young people to be able to learn like evidence-based facts and, you know, good quality information about sexual and reproductive health. And that should come from the home. Obviously, family is extremely important, especially as children need sexual education from like since a very young age, basically. And then when they start going to schools, that's when, you know, teachers then can play a role, and having like a good safe space in that school for students to ask questions, to have respectful relationships, then is also really, really important. And then just like government regulations, to have, you know, good policies around sexual and reproductive health, provision of, you know, contraception and things like that is really important. Because we see in a lot of countries where these regulations are not positive, like are not promoting informed choices and the rights of young people to kind of make decisions about their own bodies and, you know, health. That's really also detrimental to a lot of their well-being and health. Tech platforms as well, in terms of like, because there's so much misinformation circulating online, you also have, you know, to play a role. So because, you know, like adolescents and young people, it's not enough to kind of teach them once. Then you kind of have to like, like this is, you know, pay attention to this. And so having this kind of like multiple layers of support around these adolescents that can help them kind of really absorb the message. And then they can, if they need help, they have the freedom and the space to ask for help from the adults that they trust. That's really important.
So I actually wondered, especially like given the fact that you've had experiences both in Indonesia, you've then now come to Oxford, and I can imagine that even in the platform that you work in, you work with people from different parts of the world, even though they might originate from Indonesia. What has been your kind of experience, and what have you seen in terms of globally the kind of education there is when it comes to reproductive health? What are some of the gaps and some of the challenges, and what do you think might be helpful in helping to address some of these?
So that's a great question, because like everything else, sex education and sexual health is also not uniform across the globe, and sadly it does mimics a lot of the patterns that we see in terms of like global north countries and richer countries, high-income countries having better sexual and reproductive health and access to education, to services that young people need. So there are still lots of gaps and inequalities, not just in terms of like resources a country has to kind of invest in their sexual and reproductive health, etc., but also kind of like these more cultural and societal norms. So we're seeing that in societies, maybe like in the Netherlands or Belgium, or like more progressive kind of these like more liberal countries, they have more progressive policies and education content on sexual health for young people and adolescents, and these young people are able to kind of access contraception, information, etc. Obviously there are still kind of disparities within the country, but we can see that they have, you know, these things that are better across the board versus maybe other countries with more kind of like strong cultural or religious norms around sex. In my country, for instance, in Indonesia, it's also a very taboo topic. Like sex is like very taboo. And I'm also sure like in a lot of like lower and middle income countries, that's also the case. And that also leads to a lot of disparities in how young people are able to kind of make informed decisions about themselves. So sadly, yes, there's still so much inequality that we're kind of still working on it.
You've highlighted like quite a lot of like the gaps and the challenges that are there, but what can actually be done to help address those, especially like in resource constrained contexts, but also considering, you know, some of what you're saying, that it's taboo to even have these kinds of conversations. So I guess even if we had the resources, the conversations wouldn't be any different because of more like cultural and context specific factors.
Exactly. I think what has been done a lot in this field, and things that I have done also personally, is that we are taking these like evidence-based initiatives or programs that have probably started in, you know, the global north countries, because that's where like a lot of the research is doing, things like that, and then kind of adapting it to more local contexts in other countries, but doing it in a very kind of bottom-up way, in partnership and with meaningful engagement of local communities, because then that's how you kind of find out, okay, this is the angle that we could take, these are their actual concerns about sex education. So for instance, like in our platform, we try and engage a lot with parents, because they are sometimes the gatekeepers to like sex education. They have a lot of like worries about what it's gonna do to their children, and these are valid concerns, because obviously parents want the best for their children, and only when we're engaging them in a conversation, we're trying to design initiatives with their needs in mind, in partnership with them, then that's how we can develop, you know, solutions that will actually work in that specific context. So I think it has to do with like really having like bottom-up approaches, and not, you know, like this one-size-fits-all solution. And the good thing is a lot of people are already realizing that. So yeah.
Actually, now that I think about it, we're speaking about like government systems, right?
Yeah.
And how like they have a massive role in that.
Yes.
But I also feel like private companies also need to kind of step up in that perspective. Because I'm thinking about like the first time that I actually got proper like sexual reproductive information and like education, there was this sanitary towel brand. It's called Lilette's. And what they did was they started this thing called Vagina Varsity. Listen, I was on those videos. Literally, I would watch every single one of them. I would wait for the next episode. And it's on YouTube, and I think, honestly, like, I think that the page is still there.
Okay.
And essentially, like, they told you everything about, like, what the vagina looks like, what it does.
Yeah.
And I feel like that gave me so much confidence in terms of just, like, my knowledge and understanding. So, yeah, that feels like such an important thing, that it's not just only limited to, like, government agencies, that there are actually private companies that can get involved and start these conversations, like, and bring these conversations in the spaces where young people are, and also even older people. Because I remember at this time, I think I was doing my first year in undergrad, and I'm just like, whoa, actually I'm learning so much about myself. And that made me kind of even perceive just like periods as something that is, rather than something that I hate and I dread, to actually being something that I'm just like, ooh, okay, like, it's here, hey girl. Right? And I feel so different about it now, simply because I've had this experience of actually getting a sense of that. And I also wondered about that, like, what do you think might be helpful in terms of better advocating for this and making sure that, you know, this is information that's accessible to people? And I say that because it feels like not only do we need to think about like increasing accessibility to these resources, because if I think of South Africa, if you go to the clinic, yes, there is access to like condoms and contraceptions and etc. But the lectures you'll get there as a young person, firstly, you'll be asked like, what are you doing having sex in the first place? You know, those kind of stuff. So how do we better advocate for, I guess, this kind of information to be accessible to people? And how do we help young people navigate those kind of stigmas of even wanting to have this information? Or like, I feel like I had to kind of sneak to even get this information from Vagina Varsity, and I'm just like, whoa.
That's so funny.
At least someone's got my back. Like, they're helping me out with this. So any kind of thoughts around like how we can better navigate that?
No, that's a great question, and that's an amazing example, and I love that. I love that for you. I love that. Honestly,
I love it for me too. Thank you, Lilith. Thank you, darling.
Shout out to Lilith. Shout out to Lilith.
Literally, years later, I am eternally grateful to you.
So I think like what you said, right? When you were exposed to that information, you felt a lot more confident and empowered, and I think that is also one thing that was really transformative for me, also growing up in a very conservative country, is that when I started to learn about sexual and reproductive health, I started to also know that I have rights, like to kind of basically just know your rights, that you have the right to good, comprehensive, evidence-based sexuality information services. You have the right to control your own body, to make informed choices. And you can read all about this kind of online if you want more resources about, you know, sexual and reproductive health and rights. Okay, so now also like just introducing another term. So now a lot of people are saying sexual and reproductive health and rights. So that could be something you could also search for. And understanding your rights then kind of just really empowers you, at least in my experience, to kind of then stand up and kind of like, okay, yeah, this is what I need. And then also I think what was really transformative for me, and I know this can be really hard, but kind of finding other people or a community where you open up about these things and kind of start conversations about it, like what we're doing. And I know that it can be really hard, especially within very conservative settings, but sometimes how I did it, I was just kind of like, I tried to kind of open up conversations about sex among my friends. And I was like really nervous about it. I was like a young girl, just kind of like, you know, just starting to learn about sex. And I was feeling like super nervous about it, but I wanted to be the person to kind of open up that space so that other people can also kind of like, you know, let's just kind of talk about it and learn from each other. But what I did was basically I kind of just sent like jokes or memes or things on Instagram that people were posting around sexual and reproductive health, and I used that as kind of like a starting point or like an entry point to discuss things with my friends. And so if you're unable to kind of, you know, talk about it first, then you can use all these kind of, maybe you can send this video to your friends.
That's true.
As a starting kind of point. And I think the more conversations we have about it, open conversations we have about it, the better it is for the issue, because then other people will be like, okay, sex is normal, sex is part of life. There's nothing, you know, we don't need to be embarrassed or shy about it. It can be a gradual process, and I understand that it can be difficult. So just kind of take your time and know that we're here for you.
That is true. And I think just also having these kinds of conversations, like you said, that they're important, and also creating that sense of safety to start those kinds of conversations. And that, like you described, that conversation could literally start with you sharing a link to a certain video, and then that kind of creates a sense of safety for us to then start engaging in those kinds of conversations. And I also just wondered, in terms of like other resources and other support that we can direct people towards, and they're just like, hey, you know, actually this video has been quite helpful for me, but I want to find out more information. I want to find out like where I can get additional support. I want to find out more about things like vagina varsity. So where would you recommend that people start looking for those kind of like support and resources that can help them in this journey? So there are like a lot of resources, but I think good starting points would be some of these like really reputable organizations who have been working on this issue like globally for decades. And I can share more, but like things that are on top of my head is, you know, Planned Parenthood. So I think Planned Parenthood is like particularly famous or well known in the US, but we actually have like an international federation of it, and they work in different regions in different countries, and they're really championing these like rights and informed choices for young people. So if you just Google like International Planned Parenthood Federation, like, and then your country or your region, I'm sure you can find lots of resources. And then also we also have a UN agency for this, which is called UNFPA. It's the United Nations Population Fund. I used to work there, so this is a little biased, but they're also doing amazing work, and they have a lot of resources on what young people, you know, can do and things like that. And obviously I can share more resources, so you can put them in the description. Also like a lot of great resources for underrepresented communities, for instance like LGBTQIA plus young people dealing or living with HIV, etc. So us as a community of like sexual and reproductive health and rights have tried to be very intentional about creating specific resources for specific communities, because we know that they have their own unique needs and concerns. So I can also definitely share what I know is great to you, and then you can also, you know, put them in the description box. And there are lots of good resources, so don't worry. Okay, so I have one last question.
Okay.
And I guess this is more of a personal question in
Okay.
terms of your own personal experience and your own personal journey.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you wish you knew and understood before you got like access to all of this information? And I guess before you actively went through the process of seeking out this information that would have been really helpful for you as a young person?
Yeah. Wow, that's a great, deep question. No, I was like,
I'm sorry to just throw you in there.
This is a reflection moment.
Yeah, this is a reflection moment.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be a psychologist if I didn't get you to reflect.
True.
So.
I should have expected this from being a psychologist myself. Like, I should have expected. Yeah, I think it comes back to what I was saying about the myth. I think growing up as a young girl, I often felt a lot of like shame and guilt and confusion about, I heard from other people, I saw other people that it's supposed to be this way, or you're supposed to feel this way. And whenever I had my own kind of unique experiences, I felt that I was like, something was wrong with me. So I think my message to like my younger self and like other young people who are going through the same thing is that, again, get rid of all these shoulds and things that you think you have to be, or like you need to be, and just kind of focus on like what feels right and empowering for you and your body, and trusting yourself and trusting your body, what it's telling you is really important, and something that I wish that somebody had told me when I was growing up, because like I said, I felt so much like shame and guilt. But I'm grateful that experience has enabled me to kind of then talk to people about it, so it's all good now. But I wish I had told myself that in the
No, I actually like what you said in terms of like what feels right for you and what feels empowering for you. And this is why we even have these kinds of conversations, because the whole point is to empower people and to help them find what feels right for them and what's suitable for them, without them like having to worry about like stigma or being discriminated against. And those kind of things feel like such an important thing if we're thinking about young people, and also thinking about these young people then progressing into being adults who also contribute to keeping the cycle of not sharing this kind of information, but more importantly, like not building that confidence and sense of empowerment for future generations as well.
So true. Because these adults then will have their own children. And the cycle goes. So.
That's true. But thank you so much for your time and invaluable inputs, guys, and thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, listen, we have something even better for you.
Even better. Wait for it.
So please tune in to our next video, where we will actually be speaking a lot more about sex and how to make sure that not only do you have positive sexual experiences, but also like improving the kind of perceptions you even have in relation to that. And
so part 2 is coming.
Listen,
part 2.
Me, I am ready.
Are you ready?
I don't know about you, but thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next time. Mwah.